Welcome to As It Happened, Day of Terror, September the 11th, 2001. I'm Shepard Smith atop Fox News headquarters in New York, and behind me, the forever altered skyline of Manhattan. 2 buildings missing, thousands of innocent lives lost, a nation in shock. It's a story we never dreamed we would tell that begins around 8:45 a.m., September the 11th, 2001.
We have a very tragic alert for you right now. An incredible plane crash into the World Trade Center here at the lower tip of Manhattan.
It's believed a 737 has crashed into. There's speculation at this point, but at least 3 floors taken out, crashed into the side of the building. Joining us right now, one of the producers with Fox Report, Owen Mugen on the scene. Owen, what do you know? What do you see? Where are you?
Yeah, Brian, I'm on the roof of my building, which is about 5 blocks to the south of the World Trade Center. I'm looking right now at the World Trade Center. There's a massive gaping hole on the second tower. It's about 15 stories from the roof. It's just unbelievable to look at. There's a massive hole.
Owen, your apartment is just a few blocks from it. Did you hear anything?
I was lying in bed. All of a sudden I heard what sounded like a plane or something coming extremely low, and then we just heard this shattering explosion. I ran up to the roof and confronted by this horror. There's a gaping hole. I can see the south face, and there are flames, there are papers flying out of the windows. You can see emergency vehicles tearing south from the West Side Highway, heading toward the scene. There are tons of people in the streets. There are papers, things fluttering out. I can't see any evidence of what it was that could have crashed. All I can see is just this massive gaping hole with tons of black smoke falling out of the building.
The plane obviously went in on one side and came out the other. There's debris all over the ground down below.
On part.
Exactly. And as you can see, it affects perhaps 10 floors of the World Trade Center.
It is almost 9 o'clock here on the East Coast, and let me tell you, folks are in that building early, and without a doubt, there are many people who were impacted by this.
It's speculated that the plane is as big as a 737. It looked originally like it just hit 3 floors. As I see from this angle, it seems like more than 3 floors, and perhaps what's most disturbing, Edie, I think, is the time of day. This time of morning is when people pour into that building, and it's usually next to full.
It obviously impacted one side and wound up affecting perhaps the other side. We do know there is debris all over the floor, down the pavement down below, and crews are, they've got all the police and the fire department and the emergency technicians are headed to that area. This is horrible. Not only are there gaping holes, but debris continues to fall down below at this hour. As you can see, this is a story of enormous magnitude.
Oh my gosh.
And we will have all the latest right here on Fox News. Right now, let's hand it over to John Scott.
We will continue to keep an eye on this developing story. All we can do is stare aghast at these pictures at this point. This could have been an accident. We're not necessarily talking about a deliberate act here.
I wouldn't think so immediately at all. You've got to find out why he crashed, and obviously if it's a deliberate terrorist act, then there'll be a message probably from somebody taking credit for it.
Eyewitnesses are saying it was a small commuter plane. Again, these early reports are just coming in now from the wire services. A small commuter plane apparently hitting the side of the World Trade Center. You can see the smoke. The smoke tower is growing. There is quite a bit of flame inside the building. The 2 towers are home, at least during the day, to upwards of 50,000 workers in those 220 floors.
Right.
I am reminded of a couple of things that happened recently, Dr. Gross. Not long ago, within the last couple of weeks, in fact, there was a pilot who flew. There was another one. We just saw another one. We just saw another one apparently go. Another plane just flew into the second tower. This has to be deliberate, folks. We just saw on live television as a second plane flew into the second tower of the World Trade Center.
When we return, how could the incomprehensible happen? First-hand reports coming up.
continues in just a moment. As the cleanup continues in one part of the Pentagon, Defense Department officials are preparing for war in another. Brian Wilson now with the latest.
The recovery efforts continue here at the Pentagon around the clock, and though the disaster site is not as large as the one in New York City, the work here is just as grueling. We have some pictures to show you taken by Department of Defense camera operators that give you some indication of just how mangled the building is inside. This the result, of course, of American Airlines Flight 77 slamming into the building at approximately 400 miles an hour. The building is unstable. Again, it means they'll have to go in and spend a couple of more days stabilizing the building. They are trying to find the right balancing act. It is both a crime scene and a place where people have lost their loved ones. A very difficult chore for the workers who say they only think about it when they stop the work. One other picture to show you that gives you an example of just how tough this old building is. An aerial picture provided by the Arlington County Fire Department. From overhead you can see that most of the damage is on the outer ring of the Pentagon, the so-called E-ring, but underneath the roof of the building, what you cannot see from this picture is the damage extends down into the C and to the D blocks. Now, Secretary of Defense Rumsfeld says make no mistake about it, the Pentagon continues to plan for war. It won't be conventional warfare because the enemy is not a conventional enemy. It is, they are terrorists. They live in apartments. They operate on cell phones and computers, but the Pentagon is prepared to go after them in a non-conventional way, whatever they have to go, whatever they have to do. At the Pentagon, I'm Brian Wilson reporting, Fox News.
Brian, thank you very much. We're going to continue to update you this hour on all the very latest. In the meantime, now back to our special, As It Happened.
We know it was no accident, those suicide jets plowing into the buildings which once stood behind me. Now the question of who's responsible becomes the focus.
Given what has been going on around the world, some of the key suspects come to mind. Osama bin Laden. Who knows what? Eric Shawn is with us. Eric, I know you have a lot of sources at the FBI and other agencies like that. What can you tell us?
Oh, first, I apologize for being out of breath because I was walking down Fifth Avenue, which is close to our studios, and I heard a jet, perhaps a 737 or a small Airbus, flying low, unusually low over Fifth Avenue, making a right. But people looked up, and it made a right toward the building. John, what we just saw, though, obviously, if that indeed was a second aircraft that hit the southern tower of the World Trade Center, that obviously raises the specter of an intentional terrorist attack.
Both towers now in flames. We have reports of at least 6 people killed, 1,000 injured, and clearly those numbers are going to go up. Bill Stokes is on the phone with us. He is an eyewitness to what happened. Bill, we just saw the video of the plane hitting the second tower. What did you see?
I was sitting at my desk by the window here working and heard an abnormally low flying plane come right down the street practically, and then followed by a loud bang. People rushed from the apartments onto the street. I've never seen anything like it. Everybody's a little freaked out here.
With good reason.
What we just saw was a twin-engine, it appeared to be a twin-engine jetliner. You've got several makes. It could be a 737, perhaps. It looked kind of large, so it could be a 737-800, which is the newest generation of airliners. I think the question is, where does that airliner come from? They're expensive. Was it hijacked? Do we know where it came from? Were there any markings? Were they are these intentional pilots who are kamikaze pilots executing this kamikaze attack into the World Trade Center? Were they stolen? Are they small Airbuses? I think one of the first things investigators have got to start to do right now is find out where these planes are from, who is flying them, are there any more coming, and what can they do to intercept any others if there are. I imagine that there has got to be a ground hold right now at all the airports in the New York area, as well as a freeze in the air traffic center of all the aircraft around the New York metropolitan area. And if there are any other airplanes coming, perhaps the Air National Guard or others will have to start dealing with this. And in the air, maybe they've already scrambled at the moment as we speak. So I think clearly, judging by the pictures that we've seen, sadly, horribly, what we've long feared and many have worried about and thought could never happen would be a terrorist attack, a deliberate terrorist attack on the World Trade Center, as we are witnessing right now.
Again, folks, we have to remind you, 50,000 people work in these buildings each and every day. It happened right at 9 a.m. A good number of those folks were already at their desks. The death toll is certainly going to be tremendous in this tragedy here, and that's all that we can say about it. It is a tragedy. It is abhorrent. It is disgusting.
You can speculate completely about how this happens, because obviously it takes a lot of training and expertise to fly a complicated, sophisticated aircraft, whether it's a Boeing 737 or a smaller Airbus. These are not little Cessnas and little Pipers. So there is you have to wonder and raise what possibility there is with the type of scenario that was going on in the cockpit.
Reports of a hijacking of a plane coming into the FBI, a hijacking of a plane shortly before this incident took place. Our Wendell Goler is at the White House, rather make that Sarasota. He is traveling with the president. Wendell Goler, what's the reaction from the president?
John, the president is here promoting a reading initiative on the second day of a two-day trip to Florida. He just finished reading to some children at the Emma Booker Elementary School and was asked about the incident. He said he was aware of it and that he would have something to say about it later. His aides have been scrambling for the past 15 or 20 minutes, both to find out what is happening and to keep the president briefed as well. Secret Service agents are also watching the video on Fox and other television networks. All sense that this may well be a terrorist incident of some kind and something that will certainly draw the president's involvement. We've got a report from the FBI that a 737 was hijacked very shortly before the second plane flew into the other World Trade Center tower. And as you can aware, the president, who travels with secure communication to his national security staff, is being briefed about this even as we speak. John?
All right, Wendell Goler, thanks very much. This is going to cause a great deal of chaos in financial markets worldwide, to say nothing of the absolutely certain loss of life. We have a report of 6 people dead and 1,000 injured, but those numbers are certainly going to go up. Mark Bernbach, a Fox employee, is on the phone with us. Mark witnessed this from what we understand. Mark, were you close enough to be able to see any markings on the airplane?
Hi, gentlemen. How you doing? Yeah, there was definitely a blue logo. It was like a circular logo on the front of the plane, towards the definitely towards the front. As far as I knew, when I saw it coming down, I was like, well, LaGuardia is pretty far away, and that plane is really slow. And definitely very low. And I'm completely panicked. I'm sitting here freaking out. I cannot believe what I just saw.
When we come back, the investigation and the U.S. probe which focuses on Osama bin Laden.
Once again.
Welcome back to this Fox News special. Most of the survivors of the collapse of the World Trade Center say they never thought they would make it out alive. Pandemonium in the streets, people running to save their souls, rescuers heading into the buildings, and many never coming out. Our David Lee Miller sets the scene in Lower Manhattan.
The World Trade Center in Manhattan in flames now after apparently 2 large airplanes, we're talking about jetliners here, slammed into the sides right around 9 o'clock this morning. All right, let's bring in David Lee Miller, our correspondent. He has an eyewitness with him. David Lee, what can you tell us?
Good morning, John. I'm a few blocks from the World Trade Center right now. As you would expect, all the roadways are pretty much cut off. The only way to get near the buildings is on foot right now. The scene is absolutely a horrific one. You have people streaming out of the area. You've got people literally in tears and shock. People that just worked in the nearby buildings that cannot believe what has happened. Still, many of them remember the terrorist attack years ago on the World Trade Center. And for many of them, this is just an ugly reminder of that, although the details of what happened here are not certain. As I was walking downtown in Lower Manhattan, making my way to the World Trade Centers, I stopped to speak to Sylvia Fuentes. She's with me right now. We're a few blocks away from the building. She works in Lower Manhattan. She used to work in the Trade Center, and I'm going to actually hand her the telephone right now, and she's going to describe for us what she saw this morning as she was arriving at work. Sylvia?
I was at the deli on Fulton Street, and I heard a loud rumbling, and when I walked out of the deli onto Fulton Street, I looked up in the air, and there was an airplane actually going into the World Trade Center, and flames were coming out, and smoke was just billowing in the air, and tons of people were running down Fulton Street, just running each other over, and I made my way back to my office on Water Street, and when I got upstairs, I looked out my window to see what was going on, and the Second World Trade Center just went into flames.
Once again, David Lee Miller is on the phone with us. David?
John, I think it's important to keep in mind this morning that just getting information out is a difficult thing at this time because there are people running through the streets with their cell phones in hand, many like myself, who are unable to actually get through on the cell system. It is overloaded, and the only way for most people to communicate right now is to find a regular telephone line because they're just literally thousands of people streaming through the streets, all of them not knowing what to do or what has happened here.
Right. All right, David Lee Miller, thanks very much. Want to bring into the discussion William Daley. He is a former FBI agent. Bill, there are reports that the FBI is looking into the possibility of a plane hijacking. When you look at these buildings are the symbols of capitalism to enemies of America, aren't they?
Absolutely, John. I mean, these have, as we know, were the target of the terrorist attack in this last decade. And by comparison, that explosion, as horrific as it was, certainly pales in respect to what we see happening here today. Just the thought that, when I first heard the reports, by the way, and I heard that a plane had hit the top of the World Trade Center, I thought perhaps it was something that was gone awry, a small plane lost control. Certainly the worst fears of anyone in law enforcement and security is someone directly going after a building, particularly the World Trade Center. Then just a few minutes later, another plane intentionally flying into the World Trade Center just dramatizes the fact that we have a serious, I believe, a terrorist incident here. And I believe that something has happened that has caused these planes to be taken or be commandeered.
We all shared in that hope, Bill, in the early going. In fact, one of our early guests from the former National Transportation Safety Board investigator was saying, hey, this could have been a pilot who was temporarily disoriented, maybe blinded by the morning sun. It has happened before. A skyscraper, the Empire State Building, was hit back in 1945 by an Army bomber. But that was in the fog. This was on a bright, clear morning. And when we saw that second plane slam into the second tower intentionally, quite clearly, you got to believe this is a terrorist attack. It doesn't seem like there would be two suicidal pilots out there who just wanted to, fly their planes into these buildings for whatever reason. A suicidal person might want to do that.
John,
Harvey Kushner is on the line with us. He's a frequent guest of ours and a terrorism expert. Harvey, is it too early to speculate about suspects? I don't want to bring up memories of the Oklahoma City bombing when people were talking about Middle Eastern terrorists.
Yeah, obviously it's too early to bring that up. Who might be responsible if, in fact, it is terrorism? I mean, look, John, I couldn't conjure up a story like this. I couldn't. If I wrote a script like this with two planes, I believe there were two, go into the Trade Center on a clear day like this, somebody laugh at me and say this is beyond bizarre. So one thinks only that this could be the most horrifically planned incident, in the annals of terrorism against the United States. Think about it. I mean, you look outside the Fox studios, look how clear it is. I mean, how could you miss the trade towers? We're talking about terrorism. No matter how this turns out, this is going to be a day that's going to live in infamy. And, it's going to cause changes in terms of, if it turns out to terrorism, in terms of security like this country has never seen before. And if it just happens to be an accident, it's going to change FAA NTSB and the whole airline industry and flight patterns over New York, especially if it's a small craft involved or if it's a 737.
I think it's way beyond calling this an accident at this point, Harvey. But
well, I'm trying to be incendiary. You know,
right?
I recall. I'm old enough, unfortunately, to recall the incidents in which people from Middle Eastern descent were blamed for the Oklahoma City right out front. You remember that,
right? I do,
and certainly,
we want to
the
stay away from that.
Which occurred with TWA 800 as well.
Right.
But to me, as I said to you, I couldn't conjure up a story like this, John. And I'm sure you've covered news throughout the world. This is something
this
is just...
This is absolutely
it's literally
horrific.
Put goosebumps. For a terrorism guy like myself, it's put goosebumps on my body.
When we come back, the focus shifts to Washington, where the military building that protects the free world is under siege. This Fox News special, As It Happened, continues in a moment.
The scene is horrific. One of the two towers literally collapsed. I was making my way to the foot of the World Trade Center. Suddenly, while talking to an officer who was questioning me about my press credentials, we heard a very loud blast, an explosion. We looked up, and the building literally began to collapse before us. There was debris falling, I'd say at least 3/4 the height of the building. People within the entire perimeter began literally, including myself, that's why I'm out of breath, to run for our lives. And I am now standing in a black cloud of smoke left over from the debris. There's soot. It's difficult to breathe. People ran into nearby office buildings once they got out of the danger zone just to be able to breathe. I'm on a payphone on the street right now, and I literally cannot see more than a quarter block away.
Welcome back to As It Happened, Day of Terror, September the 11th, 2001. I'm Shepard Smith at top Fox News headquarters in New York with a bird's eye view of lower Manhattan and what was the World Trade Center, where now America digs its dead and wounded from the rubble below, happening here and in Washington. This skyline left with a massive hole, while the country is left with a sense of vulnerability. By 9:30 a.m. on September the 11th, we were a nation under siege.
Today, we've had a national tragedy. Two airplanes have crashed into the World Trade Center in an apparent terrorist attack on our country. I have spoken to the Vice President, to the Governor of New York, to the Director of the FBI, and have ordered that the full resources of the federal government go to help the victims and their families, and to conduct a full-scale investigation to hunt down and to find those folks who committed this act. Terrorism against our nation will not stand.
Clearly a shaken President Bush, jettisoning what were intended to be his remarks on education. Perhaps a little more education worldwide would prevent this kind of thing in the future, but we are going to be looking at an enormous death toll. 50,000 people work in those two buildings. They have been slammed into by airplanes. You're looking at the footage of one of the planes coming in earlier. This is the second plane, a jet aircraft, hitting the World Trade Center about 2 minutes after 9, perhaps 5 minutes after 9 this morning. Rita Cosby is on the phone with us, and Rita, I understand you have a lot of new information.
Yeah, John, I have just been told from a U.S. law enforcement official that they're saying it is evident that this is a terrorist-related attack, and among the key targets, key people that they're looking at is Osama bin Laden. It was just last Friday that the U.S. State Department put out a worldwide caution to American citizens traveling abroad and also to U.S. government facilities, and they said that terrorism knows no limits, whether it's on U.S. soil or outside. So they're certainly looking at that as a possibility. What I'm also hearing from my officials at FAA, at the Federal Aviation Administration, is that they believe the first plane may have been an American Airlines plane, a commercial jet, either a 737 or 757, and that it was a hijacked plane. This is what they believe. They're still trying to get this verified, but they did get some reports that there was an American Airlines plane that was hijacked en route from Boston to Los Angeles this morning. And they're saying that there is a strong possibility that that first plane that crashed into one of the towers, which does appear to be commercial, and looking at the video, they're saying appears to be either a 737 or 757, that apparently might have been the hijacked plane. In terms of what the second plane is, they said that does appear, as you've been reporting, John, to be a jet plane, probably a 737, twin-engine jet airplane. And those are the two things that are being looked at. They said at this point, there was no direct threat that they were aware of as any specific threat in terms of targeting the Twin Towers there in New York, but that they did have specific threats against Americans and American facilities around the world, and that's why they issued that worldwide caution. We also know that the FBI Rapid Response Team has been deployed. It is en route. Several FBI agents are already on the scene there at the Twin Towers, but they are definitely looking at this as a terrorist-related act, looking at this point not knowing who is behind it, but looking at the strong possibility that it may be Osama bin Laden, the mastermind behind the East African embassy bombings several years ago.
All right, Rita Cosby, thanks very much. I want to bring into the conversation William Daly. Bill, I know that Osama bin Laden likes airplanes, and again, we are not attributing this act to his organization, but he was implicated in a plot to blow up something like 13 airliners in 13 days, or 8 in 8 days. That back in the Philippines, back in the 1980s, I believe.
Exactly.
Airplanes have been his terrorist weapon of choice in the past.
They have, because they hold for someone like a bin Laden or other terrorists. The fact that you could take a plane and within just the number of people on the plane commit such a horrendous act at one time makes an impact to the world. Combine that with what we see in front of our eyes today at the World Trade Center, and you certainly conjure up the worst possible scenario that certainly law enforcement could think of what a terrorist might do.
The most terrible and heartrending thing about this is about 15 minutes ago, bodies started dropping from the top floors of the tower closest to the highway. About at least 5 or 6, and it was absolutely terrible. Obviously, they had two choices: to be burned in flames or to leap and end it all. It was quite tragic.
I guess you just heard the explosions. You didn't get a chance to see the planes involved.
No, I did not, but I looked up immediately afterwards, and of course the flames were everywhere. There's an enormous jagged hole in the first tower. The second hole in the second tower is much less extensive and much less dramatic, but there's flames out of that too, and of course there are flames burning in the parking lot across the street from the World Trade Center because of debris that has fallen down, and of course there's complete pandemonium here, and every building in the neighborhood is being evacuated or has been evacuated.
All of Manhattan has been sealed off. This is probably unprecedented. Of course, all of this is unprecedented in this dastardly occasion, but Manhattan has been sealed off. The Hudson River bridges and the tunnels have been sealed. Clearly, there is an attempt right now to thwart any further act of terrorism, act of violence against the people of Manhattan. So Manhattan is in a lockdown. We've heard that phrase used in school shootings. We've heard that phrase used in jailbreaks. I can't recall ever having that phrase used with regard to a city the size of Manhattan. But Manhattan is in a lockdown. It is sealed off. The Hudson River bridges, the tunnels, the east side, the west side, the north, the south. Of course, we are an island here in Manhattan, has been sealed off. One can only guess that the U.S. Armed Forces is now in a state of high alert to prevent any planes or any other vehicular traffic in the air from impacting anywhere in Manhattan on civilian targets. We are a city under siege right now, and the United States of America is warding off any further terrorist threats on the city of Manhattan.